The Florida Podcast Network, the voice of Florida.
From Mallory Square in Key West to the Governor's Mansion in Tallahassee and all points beyond, you're listening to the Florida Beer Podcast, powered by FloridaBeerBlog.com, your source for all things related to the craft beer community in the Sunshine State. And now your host, Dave Butler.
Welcome to episode 135 of the Florida Beer Podcast, coming to you from Georgia. Not actually in Georgia right now, but we are coming to you from Georgia with part 2 of our interview. If you missed part 1, go back next week. You'll know who I'm talking about. You'll know where I'm talking about. Go back and listen to episode 134. But if you did listen to episode 134, welcome back. We are heading right back to Atlanta, Georgia, right back to New Realm Brewing, and right back to our interview with Mitch Steele, author, brewmaster, COO, and general all-around amazing human being, especially when it comes to beer. Obviously, you listened to a lot of his background and his IPA love. Now that we are in Georgia, as the story goes, we're going to start talking about building New Realm out a little bit more. We'll continue to talk about the BeltLine and how amazing a location that is. And we will continue to speak about things such as opening up the distillery that they have there. Kind of love the bourbon that I got when I was there on my visit a couple months ago. Love that bourbon. And we'll talk about the nature of collaborations and a lot of the things that he does when he is working with other breweries, making special beers with them. Without any further ado, let's just jump right into it. Episode 135, part 2 of our interview with Mitch Steele from New Realm Brewing in Atlanta, Georgia. Enjoy. Have there been any beers that have just landed with a thud that don't move at all?
Yeah, there have been a few. And you know, the one that really sticks out in my mind because I thought it was an excellent beer. I was really thrilled with it. We did a Belgian triple and we did it as a special release. So it went into distribution in cans and it just didn't move at all. And,
that's kind of
brewers
shocking.
that came by the brewery and tasted it were like, yeah, this is a wonderful triple. But yeah, we couldn't sell a drop of it, and that happens. It's disappointing when it happens, but it's part of the deal. And, we knew we had a good beer, so that was okay. We did a low carb, low cal IPA that did well for a few months, but really, really tailed off. And, that was, again, people really love the beer, but I just don't think, I still think that people, when they go into a grocery store or a liquor store and they're looking at beers, the alcohol content matters.
And I find that interesting because it seems like when I first started doing the blog and the podcast, a lot of people, especially at beer festivals, would get frustrated because they would only take a look at the alcohol by volume, want the highest number possible, and then drink that and move on, where it seems like the exact opposite is happening now, and people are looking for that number to be low and then kind of moving on from there.
Yeah, I'm seeing that as well. I'm seeing definitely an interest in lower alcohol beers, and we've done some of that work, and I think it's important, and especially as beer drinkers get older, they don't necessarily have the ability to sit down and drink 3 double IPAs in a sitting, right? So,
exactly.
Having lighter offerings, I think, has been a great strategy. And I think it's something every brewery needs to think about doing if they're not already.
God. Obviously, COVID and the economic turn has made things a little bit more difficult for breweries, and we continue to see. In fact, I just got a report of another brewery closure just today, unfortunately.
That's a shame. I'm seeing a lot of it.
I was going to say, have you seen a lot of it? Are there challenges that have been given to you and the team at New Realm that you have never seen before in the brewing industry? Because you've been through a lot, but I don't know if anybody's quite been through something like this.
Yeah, I think what's going on right now is unprecedented. I think it's very serious. I think a lot of breweries are struggling. The price of ingredients has gone through the roof. I mean, more than almost a 100% increase, not quite, but, definitely above 50% increase in malt prices from Europe. A lot of this has to do with the war in Ukraine, honestly, with energy prices going up in Europe because nobody's buying Russian natural gas anymore.
I didn't think about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing the domino effect that the economic things are having on the brewing industry. There's been CO2 shortages, shipping costs have gone through the roof. Whether you're shipping in a truck to a distributor or shipping across country or shipping, to another country, the cost and the time to get your beer to wherever it's going and get your ingredients to the brewery, it's skyrocketed. So a lot of breweries are really struggling, and, landlords are increasing rents, and that's causing a lot of problems for a lot of brewers. It's really tough, and I think it's going to be tough for a little while, but it just kind of points out the need for breweries to have really solid business plans and not get themselves into a lot of debt if they can help it.
And that actually brings up another interesting point in mind is not only has the economy been affected, especially as COVID has gone around, and COVID is still here, obviously, but also COVID has definitely done a number on a lot of people that have had it, and especially since one of the big symptoms is a loss of smell and as sort of a domino effect, taste a little bit. Have you noticed in a lot of the people that are coming in, a lot of the patrons, that their tastes have changed, or certain things are a little bit more popular or less popular because of that particular aspect of things nowadays?
Hey, that's an interesting question. I will say I have not been made aware of anything like that. I think it's certainly possibly very real. I know some people that have had, COVID and have real long-term effects from it. Most of the people I've talked to that lost their sense of smell got it back within a month or so and were okay. But yeah, I have not seen the impact of that on what people are choosing to drink, really. If it's happening, I'm not aware.
Gotcha. Well, I will say one other thing that people are really choosing to drink, and it's something that New Realm has definitely jumped on, is more liquors, especially things like whiskeys and bourbons and so on. And I know that you have a bourbon, and it's fantastic, and I'm going to get to that conversation. But first, how did this particular conversation get started? Was a distillery always going to be part of the New Realm story, or is this something that's relatively recent?
Well, it happened after we started. Initially, we were going to be 100% a brewery, but what sparked the conversation was we do a lot of events in Atlanta. We host a lot of events. We bring companies in doing parties and things like that, and people were turning us down because all we could serve, because of Georgia law, was beer that we made on site. And, we couldn't bring in spirits or wine or anything like that. So we started thinking about, okay, how do we fix this so that we get all these people that are interested in coming to actually commit to coming? And one of the ideas that came up was to get a spirits license and start making spirits. So, that's what we ended up doing. And it's turned into a pretty big deal for us. It's very popular. The cocktails, we've got a great distiller who's doing some really nice small batch spirits blends. And it's been a big hit. It surprised me, but, people's tastes are changing. And everything in the alcoholic beverage industry is somewhat cyclical. So things peak and valley, and I think spirits are in a peak mode right now. And so we definitely were aware and wanted to be part of it.
No, I completely agree. And I'm interested to hear about the process of getting that started, because you are technically distilling and brewing under the same roof physically. But if you take a look at your still, which is, you've got kind of beautiful picture windows on one of the, I guess, side meeting rooms that you have in the tap room, it's very obvious that it is specifically walled and doored off from where the brewery is. I would assume that the law had a lot to do with that.
Yeah. Yeah, it did. And you have to have a physical separation between the production facilities, and once so fermentation can happen in the brewery, but once it goes through the still, it has to be kept in a separate area. That room where the still is was originally a barrel aging room, and we had barrels stacked to the ceiling in there, and we were aging beer on spirits barrels and things like that. And, when we started distilling, we had to make room for the still. And so we moved all that stuff out. And, it's been a neat thing. It's been a neat transition and been very different than what I expected.
Awesome. So what did you decide to distill first? Because, obviously things like vodka and gin would be pretty easy, but like I mentioned before, you do have a bourbon and that requires a significant amount of aging. How did that conversation get started as to who you were going to bring in to do it, what you were going to be doing, and so on?
Yeah, so we wanted to have a good bourbon. We wanted to have vodka, gin. We were kind of bouncing around the idea of doing some sort of agave spirit. We haven't gotten there yet, but it's coming. But yeah, we wanted to start with bourbon, gin, and vodka just because that's what people were asking for. And that's what excited us. And, so that's what we started with. And originally, we had a distillery in Savannah that was doing all the clear spirits for us. That was, the vodka and the gins. And then the bourbon was an Atlanta product. And, when we ended up shutting down Savannah last year, we had to move everything up to Atlanta.
Interesting. And I kind of want to use this to talk about the tap list in the tap room in Atlanta, which I found interesting because obviously it's got the beers, but you also serve 1.5 and 2 ounce pours of the liquors. And you also have mixed drinks using the New Realm distilled products. And you've sort of given them equal footing on the screens and on the menus. Is that something that you wanted to make sure to sort of keep them equal? Do you treat a lot of the cocktails conceptually very similar to how you treat the beers? What is your kind of vision when it comes to presentation like that?
Yeah, so the equal footing part of it is fairly recent, and it really happened kind of naturally because of the popularity of what we were doing with the spirits. The first year or two, they were kind of, down at the bottom of the menu, and we realized that we had a lot of people coming in that wanted cocktails. So we decided to make it a little bit more visible, and the cocktail mixes, every tap room that we have does it a little bit differently. There's a lot of creative freedom with our restaurant staff, our bartending staff to do neat things with the cocktails. So it's been fun because there's been some really creative stuff happening, and it's fun to see what people are thinking and what people are enjoying.
And I would assume traditionally with the brew pub, and this is what I will definitely ask, is with the menu, with the food menu, there's usually a lot of synergy between the food and the beers. Is that something that obviously New Realm does? And adding in liquors and cocktails that are kind of specific to each location, does that make that pairing a little bit more robust or difficult to achieve?
Honestly, I think it makes it a little more difficult because not many people at New Realm have a lot of experience with pairing spirits with foods, so we're just trying things and seeing what works. Certainly the initial menu that we had in Atlanta was definitely a brewery-based food menu. There's food that typically goes really well with different types of beers, but over time it's kind of evolved and our executive chefs in each location get to do limited releases a few times a year, and they just get creative with it. And if the dish works, we just keep it. And there's been a few of those, and it's been, I think, kind of the takeaway from this is that everybody has an opportunity to be creative with what we're offering to our guests. And I think not just the beer, but the cocktails, the food. And, we have certain guidelines that we have for food as we do for beer. But in general, I think celebrating the creativity and the talent of the team we have is pretty important.
And I definitely can say, especially, obviously I haven't been to Charleston and Virginia Beach yet, but the Atlanta food is absolutely fantastic, with a very big culinary team. So it is definitely chef driven. But one of the things that I guess I was a little bit amazed on was how many Asian inspired dishes there were. Definitely not something I expected in Atlanta. No, I probably should have. I haven't really seen anything like that in a brewery as well. Is that, I guess, what is sort of the inspiration behind that? I find that rather interesting.
Yeah, well, Atlanta's a very cosmopolitan city. I mean, there's a huge Asian population, a huge Mexican population here, Cuban, Puerto Ricans. It's really a melting pot, and I don't think people look at Atlanta that way. But it's been fun, for me moving here and having all these food options all around my house is really cool. So I think people that dine out in Atlanta are looking for things that might have a little bit of an international flair to them. And, this is something that we've kind of evolved into over the last few years, but, we've got, shrimp tacos, and we've got birria tacos, and, the Asian fries, and it's everything that we've done that's been kind of internationally inspired has been really well received. So we keep trying it.
Gotcha. Awesome. Another thing I kind of wanted to talk to you about, switching gears, and why I definitely wanted to get you on the Florida Beer Podcast is because last year you actually made another trip down here. I'm assuming that was not your first trip to Florida, but you came in to do a collaboration brew day with our friends at Prison Pals in Doral.
Yeah.
And I would like to talk about collaborations for a little bit, because you are definitely no stranger to this. Before we had this interview, I was listening to a story that you told about your Old Stone days and brewing stuff with Pizza Port and so on. And I guess in terms of a collaboration, how do you decide who you're going to collaborate with, how that communication is really going to get started? You've been in the industry long enough to where I would assume you would be one of those dream collaborators that almost any brewery would want to work with.
It's, for us hosting collaborations, it usually starts with a friendship and a respect for somebody else's beer. So, honestly, all the collaborations I've done, we had a couple of rules. Number one, they had to be great people. And number two, they had to have great beer. And, this business is so, craft brewing, there's so much camaraderie that there's no shortage of really cool people that you might like to bring into your brewery and brew a batch of beer with. And so I've always approached it from the standpoint of, whether I'd like to spend, a few hours developing a recipe with these people, and whether I'd like to spend a day with them in the brewery. And that is really what kind of drives who we pick to collaborate with. I will say, the Prison Pals one was fun because I was not aware of them as a brewery, and the person who put me in contact with them was Pete Schlossberg from Pete's Wicked Ale, who's an old friend of mine.
Interesting.
He travels a lot in South America, and he got to know Juan and Diego when they were down there, and then they moved up and started this brewery, and he did a collaboration with them, and then reached out to me and said, "Hey, would you be interested in coming and hanging out with us for a few days and doing a collaboration beer?" And I talked with Juan and Diego and decided I would like to do it. But Pete's recommendation had a lot to do with that.
Yeah, they are definitely great guys. I love Prison Pals, but
the hospitality was amazing. I mean, they really rolled out the red carpet for us, and I had the best time. It was just wonderful.
I think what few people realize is stepping outside and you are so close to the planes as they come in for a landing at MIA that everything shakes.
Yes, that's true. I remember that.
So with collaborations, you've been around the block for quite some time. Do you still end up learning a thing or two when you do a collaboration, even now?
Always. And, I like to tell people all the time, anytime I put a beer together with another brewer, I pick up something, because everybody has their own techniques and their own tricks or own favorite ingredients or anything like that. So, it's always something that I take away something new. And, it could be just something really minor, like a process aid or a cleaning chemical or a fermentation profile, or it could be just really out there. And that's a fun part about it. And, I'm a person who believes that if I'm not learning something, I've become stagnant. And so, when I get to do something with somebody else and pick something up, that's a success for me.
Awesome. But with collaborations, if I could be a little bit cynical for a second, how much of it is also marketing? Obviously Prison Pals, I wouldn't see this, but with some other breweries, I would assume that they would want to get together just so they can have the pretty pictures for Instagram and, have each other's names and hopefully spread the name and about the brewery and whatnot. Do you see collaborations for a marketing purpose as being a good use of the time and of the, resources? Or do you think a lot of breweries do that?
Yeah, I think we all do that to some extent. The level of which that's the focus of the collaboration is quite variable, and there are collaborations we've done just because I like the people and they were in town and we just decided to do something. There are collaborations we've done that we thought would be, make a nice splash, and make an impact. And, you just got to make sure that you don't do it just for that sake. It's again, I go back to, are they good people? Do they make great beer? Do they have the same, similar core values or business ethics that we do? If that's the case, and it helps us from a marketing standpoint too, that's just a bonus.
And keeping on the similar theme, one of the interesting things that I've noticed from a marketing, from an outreach sort of standpoint that I've never seen before from any other brewery are your cans. With the cans, every single one of them has your picture and a QR code leaning to basically, here's how beer is made. I would say, is that education portion of which, I guess, let me backtrack. How did that become an idea? Because label art is finite. There's only so much space. And obviously you've got some things that you have to put on there, federally required, of course. Yeah. How did that idea kind of get off the ground?
So that was a marketing initiative, and the original idea was to have the QR code on the can that people could access through their phone and get information on the specific beer that they were drinking. And, it was just a way of telling the story, because I still think, even as big as craft brewing has gotten, the most important thing about a beer is the story behind it and how it came about and why it's an interesting product and why people should try it. And, the whole idea of putting, that illustration of me on the can came after. But yeah, it's one of those things that, we thought it would help us, with brand awareness and getting people to get a better understanding of who we were as a brewery. And that was important.
I was going to say, is there a large portion of marketing or consumer goodwill that goes into a project like that, and education about how craft beer is made in general? Yeah,
I think so. I think, it's been so important for so long. And I think people started losing sight of it, but now you've got a whole new generation of people coming into your tap rooms and trying your beers, and the education piece never goes away. What makes an Irish stout an Irish stout? That's, the history of that and the ingredients. And, I still think there are people that are interested in learning a little bit about that kind of thing.
That's kind of awesome. And I definitely saw that. It looks like you've got a beautiful sort of overhead catwalk for tours at the Atlanta location. I'm assuming that was built intentionally.
It was, we had a tour program that we stopped when COVID hit, and then we just haven't been able to get it kicked back open again. But, the one thing that I asked when we were designing the brewery, that we not do tours on the brewery floor when we were operating the brewery, just because it's not safe, and So the idea came to do the catwalk, and it's been great because we can, groups can have events that go out on the catwalk. They'll set up cocktail tables and, draft systems and things like that. And so, it's designed as a self-guided tour, but we use it for so much more than that. And it's kind of a neat part of the brewery, I think.
Yeah, it's actually pretty cool, and it's very cool looking. Everything about the brewery is actually really, really neat, and it's just a fantastic place to go because great food, great beverages, absolutely phenomenal. With the impending things that are kind of going on in the craft industry, but also a really great location and great beers, what do you kind of see as the future for New Realm in the forthcoming years?
Well, we're actively searching for some more locations. The tap rooms have been a very good business move for us. And so, we're in the process of trying to build out a brewery in Greenville, South Carolina. We've got a couple of other irons in the fire that haven't been fully committed to yet. But, our idea when we started New Realm was to have breweries in various cities in the Southeast. And so, we don't have a brewery in North Carolina yet. We don't have a brewery in Florida yet. We don't have a brewery in Tennessee yet. Those are all on the list, and we're not going to do it unless it's the right situation, but we've got our eyes open and we're actively looking for opportunities. So, the idea is, every one of our spots is different from each other. It's not like you're walking into a chain of breweries and every single one of them looks the same. They're all very different from each other. The beer selection's different. The food selection's different. So, it's more about becoming, being a local part of the communities that we build in and really celebrating the area we're in. And I think that's been a good thing for us. It certainly was the plan from the beginning, before I even came on board, was to be that kind of a brewery. And, so we're looking for opportunities like that.
That's awesome. Well, more power to you, Mitch Steele. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I really do appreciate it. I've been looking forward to this for a long time, and it was amazing to have you on. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. This was a fun conversation. I appreciate it.
So that is our episode with Mitch Steele, our two-parter, talking about New Realm Brewing. We've got a little bit more Georgia love coming up. But before that happens, we're going to step back. We're going to head back to Florida, and we're going to switch it up a little bit. Not so much beer on the next episode, but something else a little bit different. So you'll just have to come back next week and listen to who that is. In the meantime, please make sure to follow us on social media. We are at FL Beer Blog on Facebook, but if you're on Instagram or Twitter, which most of you are, we are at Florida Beer Blog. On the internet, we are at floridabeerpodcast.com and obviously floridabeerblog.com. And if you want to reach out to us, feel free to do so at floridabeerblog@gmail.com. Make sure to like us and subscribe on the podcasting app of your choice. If you have the ability to leave a review, please do so as soon as you can. Give a nice 5-star review. It helps us get the word out to all of our potential future listeners so they can hear all about the stories that we have coming up on the podcast. We are also a proud member of the Florida Podcast Network. You can find that information at floridapodcastnetwork.com or FPN Insiders, our closed Facebook group. Our intro announcer is Jeff Brozovich. Our field producer is Steve Pekala. Executive producer for the Florida Podcast Network and Grand High Poobah is Jemmy Legagneur. This is Dave, your host and author. We will see you back next week. Thank you so much for listening, and drink Florida Craft.